The online wellness space has become so full of people spouting the most insane nonsense that when I see something like the clip I'm about to show you, I genuinely can't tell if it's satire or not.
So fingering the stink portal plays many roles. For me, it's a form of biofeedback. So for example, I got food poisoning, but I've been taking activated charcoal and clay. I like clay. This biofeedback of sniffing the stink portal by rubbing it will dictate where I am in my healing from food poisoning journey. Wow.
I'm sorry about that. I wanted to do a cold opener that got your attention, and I really hope you're still with me. Welcome to the Internet Reviewed. I'm reviewing the internet one content creator at a time to help you know who's worth following and when to smash the mute button. Now don't panic, I'm not reviewing that guy. But today's review is in the wellness space, and it's actually a dual review, so you're getting two content creators for the price of one. The creator I really want to bring to your attention is this woman who goes by Food Science Babe.
My page is about sharing fact-based, evidence-based information about foods. There are enough wellness accounts out there from people that are very misinformed about food, telling people what they should and shouldn't eat, and that's not what I do on my account.
But to really appreciate the Food Science Babe and what she's doing, it really helps to first know about the Food Babe.
Food Babe, Vani Hari.
The Food Babe, Vani.
Vani Hari.
Food Babe, Vani Hari.
Vani Hari.
Hi, my name is Vani Hari. I'm the New York Times bestselling author of The Food Babe Way and the activist behind foodbabe.com.
If you're of my vintage, you might remember Food Babe Vani Hari. She was one of the earliest wellness influencers in the online space. She's especially concerned with chemicals and toxins in food. I'll explain why I'm using air quotes for those words in just a moment. But she was really having a moment as a consumer activist about 10 years ago. Her blog was full of warnings about the harmful additives in everyday foods like butter, yogurt, and cooking oils, about the dangers of processed food, about horrible stuff like heavy metals such as lead in your protein powder. She ran investigations into restaurant chains like McDonald's, Starbucks, and Subway.
I started sharing my research on my website, foodbabe.com, and company after company has been forced to change as a result.
But we should note that just because those companies caved to the consumer pressure doesn't mean her claims about their ingredients were right. And the Food Babe wasn't getting all good attention.
Why the Food Babe enrages scientists.
The Food Babe blogger is full of shit.
The Food Babe was accused of fear-mongering with pseudoscience and of chemophobia, that is the irrational fear of chemicals. And this brings me back to those air quotes I used just before, because I think this is really important context for this whole review and in understanding the problems with the Food Babe's whole approach.
And when you look at nutrition labels and you look at ingredient labels and you see all of those chemical names, they're not there for a nutritional purpose. And this is one of the most fundamental things the human, every human should know, is that if you don't recognize an ingredient and you don't see it as something you would find in nature, it's not there to improve nutrition.
Okay, so something else every human should know is that everything in the world is made up of chemicals, and man-made or naturally occurring, something simply being a chemical doesn't mean that it's necessarily harmful. And I don't know if anything has made the point better than this series of posters showing what the ingredients of an all-natural banana and other fruits would look like if you actually listed them out.
Aspartic acid, phenylalanine, 3-methyl-butyraldehyde, hydroxylinalool.
Those posters, by the way, are the work of a guy called James Kennedy. He is a chemistry teacher here in Australia. He made them about 12 years ago, and they're still doing the rounds. I think they remain one of the best resources to explain why the indiscriminate demonization of chemicals makes no sense on a scientific level. So anyway, despite all the criticisms, Vani Hari amassed millions of followers, who she termed the Food Babe Army.
Thank you so much for joining this movement. Welcome to the Food Babe Army.
She had book deals, she sold juice cleanse guides and sugar detox programs, and she was named one of the 30 most influential people on the internet in 2015. But as this Google Trends graph shows, her relevance really peaked in around 2016, and she's been pretty quiet in the years since. However, you might notice from this little bump at the end of that graph that she's making a bit of a comeback. This is in large part thanks to the MAHA, or Make America Healthy Again movement, being led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The food babe was recently invited to present at a Senate roundtable discussion on health and nutrition.
Right now, we're at a critical moment where Americans are sicker than ever, and much of this is due to the alarming amount of harmful chemicals allowed in our food.
She spoke about that experience soon after in an interview with Jordan Peterson and explained why she's re-entering the fray.
It was like my passion was reignited, and I realized that we really have an opportunity at this point in time that I never thought was possible in my entire career, with the emergence of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. taking these issues at the national level.
So it looks like we'll be seeing quite a bit more of her again, and it feels like a good time to recap who she is and what she's all about.
If RFK is going to make America healthy again, this lady is going to be a big part of that.
Okay, so first of all, the food babe doesn't hold any qualifications in human health or nutrition. She was a management consultant before she quit her job to focus on her food activism after becoming overweight and hitting rock bottom with her health.
That's because for most of my life, I was addicted to industrial processed food. But then I had a health crisis and woke up.
That health crisis was a bout of appendicitis, resulting in an appendectomy, and it really seems to have been a pivotal moment in terms of prompting her to educate herself about food and health.
And it was that moment that I decided to take my health seriously, and the first thing I did was research why you get appendicitis. And I found out the reason you get appendicitis is because your body's inflamed and your digestive system has become inflamed. And actually your appendix is there for a reason. It actually populates your gut with good bacteria.
Right.
And
yeah,
so
it's a reservoir, right?
Yeah. And so I started to discover all of these things about my body and about the human body that I couldn't stop learning about.
So she is self-taught, but I just want to stop down here as a little bit of a side note because she's actually right there, at least about the purpose of the appendix. For a long time, it was thought of as a sort of unimportant vestigial organ, and I'm not sure how widely known this is, but there is increasing evidence that it plays an important role in housing good gut bacteria and is in fact helpful for your health. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out to acknowledge that she's not wrong about everything she researches herself, and to acknowledge that sometimes, yes, the scientific consensus on something is overturned as new evidence comes to light. I just think we need to grant that that can happen when we're dealing with these kinds of people who are challenging the status quo, while of course accepting that sometimes the status quo deserves to be the status quo. So while we're here, let's talk about what else the food babe does get right, because it would be really easy for me to make this whole video about how she's a bit cooked, but I think we should acknowledge that some of the issues she raises are legitimate and are things that many reasonable people have totally understandable concerns about. Firstly, the health issues in America are pretty alarming.
This is pent-up frustration about the fact that our kids are suffering more than ever. 38% of preteens, the ages between 12 and 18, are going to be pre-diabetic. That's unacceptable.
I can totally understand her feeling passionate about that. It's bad. Secondly, she might be right that the food lobby in America has too much power.
The biggest profit generator for Fruit Loops is actually in U.S. schools. In schools.
Oh, yes.
So it's being sold to schools and served for breakfast to our little children.
I mean, yeah, serving Fruit Loops in schools does seem kind of ridiculous. And thirdly, she's right that there's a big power imbalance between ordinary people and the technology that food companies have at their disposal to make their products harder to resist.
How do we stand a chance if PepsiCo has a robot that mimics human taste buds and engineering our food so that we cannot stop eating it? How does the human population stand a chance against that?
She's not making that up. PepsiCo really does have a taste robot.
The robot's job is to taste the samples that PepsiCo's network of trekkers collect from around the world. When the robot tastes something humans might like, the computer scores it as a hit.
And there's a lot of similar technology out there in the world of food development. The CSIRO here in Australia even has a virtual mouth program that it uses to model how different foods break down when they're chewed. Here it is showing a caramel Easter egg being eaten.
Nom, 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 nom. Oh, nom, 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 nom.
Those were their sound effects, by the way, not mine. But we should note that these technologies are often being used to make foods healthier, so they're not necessarily a bad thing. And this is where I think the food babe's lack of nuance lets her down. She makes this huge leap from highlighting the problems with terrible diets to claiming that food companies are poisoning people.
We have had enough. It's unethical and it needs to stop. Thank you very much.
So I can't say that I think her self-education has been all that sound. However, I do think there is one aspect of her formal schooling that's quite relevant to her success as an activist.
What was your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science.
Oh.
But in high school, I was a top-tier debater. I got recruited to college to be in debate. I was #1 in state 3 years in a row. And
is that why you got hired as a consultant? Did you do well in university as well?
I did.
Because it's hard to get hired as a consultant.
It is very hard, but I think my debate skills are probably what allowed me to do that because I interview well.
I think it's those debate skills much more than her research skills that have helped make her so successful. As anyone who's been involved in debating knows, if you're really good at arguing, you can win even if your case is really quite flimsy. I won't relitigate the many times she's made claims that have been debunked. There's plenty of it online that you can look up. However, I do want to highlight this one example because I think it helps to show you the level of her scientific literacy and the limits of her ability to assess information. Back in 2012, she wrote an article on her blog titled "Why It's Time to Throw Out Your Microwave." Now, it included a number of untrue claims and also quoted research supposedly showing that microwaved water forms crystals similar in shape to those formed when water is exposed to the words Satan and Hitler. And honestly, there's probably more scientific basis for the notion of sniffing your stink portal for biofeedback than there is for the existence of evil microwaved water crystals.
Smells like Mexican beans.
She did later delete that post and has described it as not my most impressive piece of work. But to me, it's really hard to get past that. I think taking something like that seriously in the first place is a huge red flag in terms of somebody's credibility in this area. Let's return then to the food science babe, because I see her as a sort of counterforce to all the nonsense that the food babe and the many wellness influencers like her flood the internet with.
Yeah, so I'm Erin. I'm a food scientist. I've been a food scientist for over 15 years now, I think. I run my Food Science Babe pages and I try to debunk the plethora of misinformation regarding food that is out there.
The Food Science Babe's qualifications, for what it's worth, are a degree in chemical engineering and many years working in and consulting for food companies, including in the natural and organic sector. We'll talk about how her work relates to her content in just a moment, but first, let's look at the content itself. Many of her debunking videos are responses to bogus claims made by other content creators. Things like this.
They're getting a double dose of weed killer that is linked to cancer.
And this.
In one prime hydration drink, they found 3 times the amount of PFOs that you should consume in drinking water in your life.
And even calling out the food babe herself for pushing untruths.
So Food Babe just straight up lied about a Once Upon a Farm baby food product that she's promoting.
She's made hundreds of these types of videos, correcting false claims and putting scary claims into proper context. She's really big on teaching people that dose is fundamental to any claims of something being toxic.
Hey guys, food scientist here. Oh, don't mind me, I'm just working in my lab. Oops, forgot my lab coat. Anyways, did you know that there's a group of food additives that food scientists put into foods that make the foods more appealing and also can be considered potential neurotoxins and pesticides? So what are they? Spices. They're spices. You can literally make anything sound scary. Yeah, capsaicin in things like pepper is considered a potential neurotoxin at very high doses.
She also points out that many seemingly dangerous man-made chemicals occur in nature all the time.
Formaldehyde is a known human carcinogen. However, dose matters. Our bodies actually produce around 1.5 ounces of formaldehyde a day as a normal part of metabolism. And there are many different foods that naturally contain low levels of formaldehyde. Here's a long list of those foods. So we have apples, we have bananas, we have pears, plums, potatoes, spinach, tomatoes. We have some different meats and meat products, dairy products, and seafood. So this would be like trying to scare people away from eating things like apples, bananas, and pears because of low levels of formaldehyde. which we know are safe.
Please note that neither she nor I are suggesting that you can just go and huff formaldehyde straight out of a jar and be fine. It's just about understanding that the mere presence of a substance in something doesn't mean you should panic. Food Science Babe has helpfully categorized her videos into playlists on her various social media pages. So if there's a particular topic you're interested in her take on, you can find everything she's ever posted about it there. There's playlists on glyphosate, food safety, baby food, sweeteners, PFAS, dyes and additives, pesticides, seed oils, GMOs, and MSG. So she's done loads of work producing this well-researched content, and I do feel for her because I think she's really up against it in the world of social media.
I just think there is so much nuance that is not covered, and again, it's social media, right? Like, it's hard for me to debunk these things too, because it's like a 30-second clip of somebody saying a processed food is toxic. For me to like debunk that, I have to take a longer time. I have to be more nuanced, and people don't watch it.
But I'm really glad she's persisted in making it because I think it does make a big difference to the people it reaches.
As someone with OCD who struggles a lot with fear around food, your content has been a lifesaver for me. I used to fear everything I ate.
Your account has really helped me reduce my stress when choosing foods and products for me and my baby.
Okay, now let's talk about the fact that the Food Science Babe has worked for food companies, because I know that will be a sticking point for some people. Firstly, as far as I can tell, and I'm very happy to be corrected if you have any evidence showing otherwise, she isn't being secretly paid by the food industry to make this content. She says she's been making it for her own reasons.
My goal was to provide free science-based resources to consumers in order to reduce fear and anxiety regarding food choices. This was important to me, as a new mom especially, as I struggled with stress and anxiety when it came to not only feeding myself, but my young child as well.
And she's actually written a really interesting article outlining the ethical dilemmas she's faced in trying to monetize her content, including with paid partnerships. So I will link to that in the blurb because I really recommend you read it. It's quite an interesting insight into the world of content creation.
At some point, I knew that in order for the amount of time I was spending researching, creating content, posting, and responding to comments, messages, and emails to be sustainable, I was going to have to make some money from it. However, I wasn't really comfortable doing ads or sponsored content, as I feared it would ruin my credibility that I'd taken so long to build. I also didn't want to turn my content into a subscription-based platform, as I want the resources I share to remain free.
And she's even trying to put herself out of business by empowering consumers to be able to spot misinformation for themselves with videos like this.
A lot of my page I have dedicated to giving you the tools so that you can spot the misinformation yourself, and you don't even need somebody like me to debunk it for you or to tell you if it's correct or not. So for example, if you're tagging me in a video where somebody is saying an ingredient is toxic, are they providing evidence for that claim at the doses that that ingredient is in food? Another thing I see a lot on here is somebody that is attacking the person and not the actual information that they're presenting, which is an ad hominem. It's a logical fallacy. So if somebody is doing this, again, you don't need my help in determining if what they're saying is correct, because they're not even addressing the information, they're just attacking the person.
Even with all of this said, I know that for some people, her mere ties to the food industry will immediately disqualify her. I personally disagree with that view. I think it's important to keep it in mind that that's her professional setting. However, I don't think it means she's necessarily wrong in what she has to say. I think we should assess those things on their merits. And I think her being educated in chemical engineering means she knows what she's talking about, certainly a lot more than most people do. And it seems to me that her experience in the food industry, including, as we said before, in the natural and organic sector, has given her some useful insights. She's talked, for example, about how she used to be a consumer worried about things like pesticides.
And I would always make sure that I would buy organic strawberries because I thought I was poisoning myself if I was eating the conventional ones.
And now realizes that a lot of health claims and warnings about toxins are just fear-based marketing.
This data is actually showing us year after year how safe our produce is from a pesticide residue perspective.
In this interview, she talked about how working for a company selling non-GMO products made her realize that was kind of meaningless too.
I've worked at companies that I am the person that gets their product non-GMO verified. Actually, that's when I kind of started questioning it a little bit myself, because 10 years ago, I was a consumer that believed a lot of these things that I debunk now. And that questioning actually started when I worked for that company where I got their products verified. And I was kind of realizing, like, this doesn't mean anything for the end food product in terms of safety or nutrition. A lot of times it is a way to just market your product as, that healthy halo marketing to make consumers think it's healthier than maybe an alternative product sitting on the shelf next to it that doesn't have that label on it.
I think she's hit on a bit of an irony there, that so many of those who say that you can't trust big food corporations because they're driven by profit ignore the fact that the natural and organic and wellness food sector is very profitable itself and relies on consumers being somewhat afraid of conventional foods. And it's at this point that we should probably note that food babe Vani Hari has her own ties to that part of the food industry too. In 2018, she launched her own line of health food products called Vani, promising real food without added chemicals, products without toxins.
When you buy a product from Vani, you're helping support a much bigger vision of changing the food system.
And look, there's a lot I could say about Vani, but I think I'll just let the food science babe say it for me.
Can we take a second to acknowledge the hypocrisy of people like this who have made an entire career out of scaring people over processed dead foods and toxic ingredients, now coming out with their own line of products that are very processed, protein powder, can't really get more processed than that have to contain warnings like this. Consuming this product can expose you to lead. Now, I'm not giving any merit to this Prop 65 warning, but this is definitely something that she would point out to claim that a product is toxic or harmful. The hypocrisy.
We're going up against the bad guys and we're going to win.
I think you can probably guess what my recommendations are at the end of this. I don't recommend following the food babe. I get that she is passionate about improving the health of Americans, and I think that's really admirable. However, she's just so incredibly misguided and scientifically illiterate that you simply can't trust that her content is always factual. It might be sometimes, but it's just so often not that it's just not worth the risk, in my opinion. And I do recommend following the food science babe. As I said, bear in mind that she works for food companies and weigh that up as you wish. But I'm confident that her content is fact-based, well-sourced, and nuanced, and provides a much needed correction to so much of the slop that social media is filled with in this space, especially over on TikTok and Instagram, where there's a new wellness influencer popping up every day of the week. I think it's a really healthy thing to have her coming up in your feed as well. And look who's here right at the very end. Look, that is all from me for now. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. And if you have any suggestions or requests for people you'd like to see me review next, let me know. You can always email me at theinternetreviewed@gmail.com. Oh, and by the way, if you're still reeling from the clip of that guy that I showed you at the start, fingering his stink portal.
It smells kind of manly and musky.
His name is Will Blunderfield. He's a pretty interesting character. Channel 5 with Andrew Callahan did a pretty eye-opening documentary on him a couple of years ago, which I will link to in the blurb in case you would like to see more.